This video is part 2 of why it often seems like an abusive partner can change and will change, even though they're not actually going to. This is this weird optical illusion or mirage effect that often keeps the people on the receiving end of the abusive behavior stuck in that situation because they're waiting for that change and believing that change might happen. Part 1 focused on how abusive behavior often comes out later in the relationship, and that can create this powerful sense that you know who the abusive partner is, and this illusion that they can just go back to being a non-abusive partner. This video will be on a different topic, which is the abusive partner will often change their behavior to be less abusive or less controlling for a short period of time and then go back to the same behavior. But that period of change, even if it's temporary, can often create this illusion that makes it seem like they can make more change if they try harder or if you try harder to help them to change. We're going to talk about 4 key ideas related to this concept. Let's get into it. The first key concept is that when somebody changes their behavior, the reason that they change their behavior matters a lot. Some reasons for changing behavior lead to long-lasting, deep-seated change. Other reasons for changing behavior are very temporary and only lead to short-term change. What we all hope is that an abusive partner who's not acting abusively anymore is doing that because they've had this deep epiphany that's changed their perspective about who they are as a person and their soul and their beliefs about relationships, and they are a changed person who's never going to do that again. But we have to examine that assumption, and that's really step 1, because I think that me and a lot of other people in this situation will look at an abusive partner who's making some changes and they'll say, oh my gosh, look, they're making some changes. Maybe they can make more changes. Maybe if we work on it together, they can keep going down that path. But that's kind of skipping this whole examining the assumption part, which is to say, okay, they made some changes. What was the reason for that? And is that a reason that's going to actually stick around? And that brings us to the second key idea in the video, which is that often abusive partners are actually changing their behavior for much more temporary reasons that are not a deep-seated epiphany that's going to change who they are as a person. That more temporary reason is often that they just don't like to experience what they're experiencing at that moment. It could be a consequence of their behavior. It could be reputational damage. It could be not being intimate with you. It could be having to hear from you that you're thinking about leaving the relationship. They don't like experiencing those things. And so that is what they're trying to avoid in many cases. And so when they're saying sorry and acting better temporarily, it's often to avoid those consequences rather than because they've really thought about themselves or thought about life or changed how they want to relate to other people as a person. And that brings us to the third main concept in the video, which is that in order to make a real change, it's something very deep that often has to change for abusive partners. It's their perspective on how they should relate to other people that they love and that are in their family or that they're having a relationship with. It's deep enough that it's about their role in a relationship and somebody else's role in a relationship, whether that's to be controlled, whether that's to never be criticized, whether that's to always be in charge, etc., etc. But that is a deep thing. That's a perspective on life thing. That's a perspective on love and relationships thing. It's not something that just changes easily. And unless they're really changing that, which is a bunch of mindsets, not even just one mindset, it's unlikely that these behaviors are going to change. This is why you can take an abusive person who has an anger management problem and you can work on that anger management problem, but the person can still be an abusive partner, because anger management is often about outbursts and controlling outbursts. But you can have a calm person who still has these abusive perspectives about how they're entitled to act in a relationship. You can have a calm person who is controlling their partner. You can have a calm person who is demeaning their partner and acting like they shouldn't be criticized and should always be in charge. The same thing goes for an alcoholic abusive person. There are many stories of people working on an alcohol problem only to find out afterwards that they're still abusive even when they're not an alcoholic. back, because it wasn't just drinking that made them abusive. There are lots of people who drink and aren't abusive. It was a problem about their perspectives on relationships. And that brings us back to the core of this third idea, which is that it is a deep change for someone to change how they relate to other people who they are in relationships with. It's not a surface level change. And so if someone's just saying, sorry, I'll never do it again, and you're thinking that the next day they're going to be a totally changed person, that is just an unlikely set of assumptions to think. It's often a much better explanation of behavior that they just don't want you to leave them. And they don't like, not having you be in a good mood. And they don't like having reputational consequences. And so they're saying they won't do it again, but it's kind of that like a little kid saying, okay, I won't do it again. And then it just happens again, a week later or a couple days later. This brings us to the fourth and final concept in the video, which is why abusive behavior often escalates and gets worse over time. It's common for abusive partners not just to keep acting abusively, but actually to get worse and worse. One reason for that is that the abusive partner learns strategies to block or prevent the consequences of their behavior that they don't like. Let's do an example. Say that they don't like you leaving them or hearing that you might exit the relationship. One strategy that they've tried is to stop acting abusively, but that's difficult for them to maintain for a long period of time because that would require changing a lot of things about who they are. So what the abusive partner often does is instead of changing their behavior, they add new behaviors that are controlling their target or their relationship partner to prevent that person from leaving the relationship. There are many different forms that this can take. It could be financial, reputational, self-harm related. It could be anything, custodial, if it's a marriage, many things. But it's common for abusive partners to try to prevent the abused person from leaving the relationship. What this does is it makes them feel safer to go ahead and continue acting abusively without having to worry about the person leaving that situation. And that's one reason the abuse can actually get worse over time, because they feel more secure to go ahead and commit it without the consequences. The same thing goes for other strategies for other negative consequences that they don't want to experience. They get better at doing the abuse in private. They get better at hiding the results of the abuse, etc., etc., etc. So taking a step back, these concepts really help explain why that optical illusion or mirage effect actually happens, where it seems like an abusive person can change who they are, and then that never actually materializes. Often it's really that they were changing for one reason, even though it seemed like they were changing for another reason. So what I'll leave you with is, if you see temporary change from an abusive partner, really critically ask yourself, is this change because the person has had a deep epiphany where they've truly changed who they are and how they think they're entitled to act in relationships? Or, based on what I'm seeing from their behavior, is it a better explanation that they were changing their behavior temporarily because they didn't like the consequences they were experiencing? I really wish someone had explained this to me and helped me understand this distinction when I was in this situation, because it's so easy to love someone so much and to hope so much that it is the deep epiphany reason and it is the deep lasting change reason, when actually it is the much more temporary reason. Good luck with your situation. Please let me know if you'd like to see a part 3 of this video, and I invite you to check out the rest of the channel for helpful resources. Thanks so much for watching, and good luck with your situation.